Welcome to Breakthrough Conversations. My name is Danielle Perry and I am the host. You should know by now I'm excited that you're tuned in today for a new episode of this podcast. And if this is your first time, this is a Christian podcast which features people of all ages, and they share a bit of their story about how God has helped them to overcome a difficult challenge, situation, or a season in their lives, or maybe they're on their way to overcoming with God's help. And they do share authentically. Well, I'm super excited about this episode because if you tuned into the last one, which featured Erica Elliott, this episode features her husband, Mr. Shedrick Elliott. And if you have been tuning in to previous episodes on this podcast, then you know that they were also in the marriage series. And so if you've not seen their episode, trust me, you will want to go and check it out because it's not only hilarious, it's very powerful. And so the title of this episode today is A Coach's Influence on and Off the Track. I'm so excited for you to hear from Shedrick's perspective as a coach, and not only as a coach, but a coach who is a man of God. Because if any of you have played sports, then you know that there were just certain coaches who not only had an impact in your life within the sport, but also in life in general, right? They were the type of person that you can call on for other things that you needed help with and you needed wisdom for. So y'all, this episode again was recorded a while back, and Shedrick has actually moved into a new position within coaching, but you're still going to hear some wisdom nuggets. And so without further ado, y'all, here it is, episode 40, part 1. Enjoy and be blessed. He is none other than Mr. Shedrick Elliott.
Appreciate that, Danielle. Appreciate that.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm well. God is good.
Amen.
He's good.
Absolutely.
And I'm saying that because I'm just trying to get myself together without Jared being here. First time doing all this without him. So
you're doing good.
Hope this goes well.
Yes.
All right. So I have you on today. I don't have a title yet for this episode, but it's definitely going to be centered around you as a track and field coach.
Yes.
And how you just influence your athletes, how you coach them, right? And then also just how you share the love of Christ to them as their coach. And so we're definitely going to dig into that. But before we do, I want you to introduce yourself and just tell our audience a little bit about who you are.
Absolutely. So my name is Shedrick Elliott III. I do like to distinguish that. So coming down from the line of my dad and then my grandfather, who's with the Lord. Okay. Married. So been married now for 9 years, come August 3rd. I've also been coaching, which obviously we'll be diving a lot into now for 17 years. So this is concluding as of next Saturday, my 9th year at Johns Hopkins University.
Wow.
And then I did prior to that from 2006 to 2014 at Western Tech in Catonsville, where I also graduated high school from myself.
Okay.
Back in 2002.
Okay.
So that experience in and of itself, which we'll get into, was, and it still is, very dear to me. So,
got you.
Also, I am the oldest of 3. Myself, my brother Josh, he lives in Michigan with his wife.
Okay.
And 3 kids, my adorable nieces and nephew. And then my little sister, who will be getting married. I call her Pookie.
I love it.
She'll be getting married in December. So,
awesome.
Yeah, I'm the oldest. Josh is 18 months younger than me, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And my sister's like around 9 years younger.
Okay.
And yeah, I guess that would probably be it.
Okay. So I was trying to do the math in my head. You said that you've been at Johns Hopkins for 9 years?
Yes.
So did you start that around when you got married?
Yes. So it was a great, almost like barometer, so to speak, of where I transitioned from like a single man coaching high school to now I'm a married man now coaching the collegiate world. And so even how I did things then versus now, they're almost exact opposites.
Wow.
But yeah, so it was a nice little mark for me because I officially, well, they have me actually incorrect in Hopkins records, but typically it was like July of 2014 when I joined with them, and then August we got married.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool. Well, I do want you to tell us, who were you, before we talk about all the coaching stuff and all of that, who was Shedrick as a young boy?
So I would say very timid, quiet, tentative, very thoughtful though, and that has not changed. But I would keep a lot of my thoughts to myself. And so, but then also going back to the physical stature, because that really did make up a lot of how I went about carrying myself. I was very thin, very small. Probably more around like 120 pounds until my senior year of high school. I remember I got to around like 133, if I'm not mistaken. And it was my senior year of high school that my dad bought me a weight set going into my senior year. And then that's when I really started falling in love with like working out and everything.
Okay.
Because we would actually use, my brother and I, but it started with me, office chairs, almost like that. And we would just bicep curl them from like the bottom part. And so like, y'all need actually something real to kind of go do. And then since then, that kind of began to shape really how I even saw myself. And we'll probably get into that down the road as well. And so, but I was also the type that would just simply do what I was told, and to a degree I still am. And so that was how I was raised from my dad. My mom, I call my stepmom, but she's my mom, is just, you just do what you're told. And that has also played a part in how I carry myself as a coach. And it certainly has, in today's world, created some challenges, because it's a different type of, I don't want to call them kids, and I'm sure I'll say that a lot, but it's
different generation.
It's a different generation. And so having to adjust to that has certainly been a process.
Okay. Well, I would have never imagined that you were my weight when you were in high school, especially because when I met you, you were already like very much so into working out and that sort of thing. So I would have never imagined that. But like you said, I'm pretty sure we'll hit on that again, right? Okay, so you were kind of timid, but attentive, as you described, as a child, and you were the type of child you would just do what you were told, right? Okay, so what about your high school years into your college years? Were you still that same kind of person?
Yes. But I would say, for the most part, any rebellion or anything like that was still all internal.
Okay.
So I wasn't necessarily expressing it, but it would be in my thoughts.
Gotcha.
And I would wonder about a lot of things. I would question a lot of things. And some of it would be so, just pointless. For example, this is super small, but my brain would just wonder these types of things. So I never knew how to drive until my senior year of high school. So I remember my mom would always pick us up, at times pick us up, and I would just look at her driving styles and just from the back seat just critique it. Like, why can't you just keep the wheel still?
Okay.
Like, just, how you could be driving, your car is going straight, but the wheel it just goes like this. Like, keep it straight in my head. Like, this is just what's in my head.
Right.
Like, why are your lights on when it's sunny outside? Why not knowing that a lot of cars nowadays, they'll have like automatic lights. I'm like, turn your lights off. Like, this is all going on like inside of me.
Gotcha.
Now, those are super small, but this was in like every area of life where I'm just like wondering like, I don't know about that. But everything is just staying internal, so to speak.
Gotcha.
And I honestly really didn't start talking about, even though, that's trivial, but as things got bigger, I really didn't start probably talking about a lot of it until my late 20s.
Okay.
And so I feel like it was like that second half of the 20s where it's like, okay, now I'm starting to develop a small confidence. Okay. Being willing to share these certain just questions, so to speak. Okay. And it probably wasn't until I got married where I actually began asking questions.
Got you.
Where that confidence came from, really from Erica, because she just asks every question.
I love it.
And just says what's on her mind at times. So I'm like, how you just do that?
Right.
Bring it in. So, but yeah, so definitely the high school transition, it was high school to college rather. That was a different transition. But yeah, certainly at Western Tech, I felt like I definitely kept to myself. Okay. Wasn't going to say too much. Worked hard, both in the classroom and off the track, because I really believed at that time I was going to the Olympics.
Wow. Really?
Statistically, it wasn't even possible. Okay. But as I said to you before we even started this, I tend to go into things extremely confident, thinking, I'm like, I can do that. And then it's like, oh, wait, I didn't realize it kind of, there's way more to that.
Goes into it.
And so, but yeah, I fully believed. I was like, okay, how, and I would talk to my dad about it. He said, how are you going to use, just say, a career for the advancement of the gospel? And I'm like, once I win my gold medal on the podium, I'm going to just thank God. Like, thank you, Jesus. And the whole world's going to hear it. Right. The end. That's just that's just what I thought at that time, that's how you're promoting Christianity, or my faith, so to speak. I just get on TV one time, and just have them interview me after I win. Right. I want to thank God, like everybody else, but in a very generic way.
Right.
And so, but obviously so much has changed, since then. And it came clear to me like the Olympics was not in the cards. Shucks, it wasn't at all. So it was like, all right, so I got to figure out life. So that's how I guess I would summarize that part.
Okay. And this is high school?
That was high school.
Okay.
Yep.
So when did you start track and field?
I started running my freshman year, 9th grade. So the freshman year of high school. So that would have been 1998 in cross country. So cross country for high school is 3 mile running.
Okay.
I didn't know that at the time. I thought that was the track team. So going back to I do what I was told, once I showed up and my brain was, oh, this is the track team. You tell me to just go run a bunch of miles, then I'm going to just go run a bunch of miles, even though I'm a sprinter. So sprinters being short distance, the race is over in 10 seconds, 11 seconds. You're running miles, you're talking 25 minutes, 30 minutes.
Right.
But I'll never forget, her name was Coach Blind. Just whatever she told me to do. She was a little short white lady. It was like, I did it. So we go run 2-3 miles. Run 2-3 miles. And in my brain, this is going to make me better. And it did. And I really believed a big part of it was I just believed, whether it was incorrect or not, and I know there's some science to it, I just believed it would work. So it did. And so it was just like, okay, it was just full trust.
Gotcha.
Would I do that again? Absolutely not. But at that age, 13, 14, it's like, okay, this is going to get me to where I want to go.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to do it. And so that's how it started. And then from there, my actual track coach, his name was David Myers.
Okay.
So he coached me for those 4 years. Didn't really know anything about track, but he was a teacher, as most coaches in like the Baltimore County or Baltimore City school system are. They're really a teachers getting a stipend, just looking for some extra funds, which I get. But he began to learn, while I was there and everything. And again, whatever he told me to do, I just did, and I was able to get better. And then my senior year of high school, I got a full scholarship. To go to Gardner-Webb University. Okay. And so it was, and my dad was really adamant about getting an academic scholarship. Because I was told, like, you better figure out how you pay for school.
Right,
so it was like, we're not paying. So it's just like, all right, well, I'm going to have to find a way to get a scholarship. Yeah. But he had kind of put a limit on me where I had to go to a Christian school. Okay. So I started looking at colleges like 9th grade, trying to find things. So my dream school, I wanted to go to Temple, which made no sense. Okay. But I really wanted to go to Temple. And I mean, once I visited, I'm like, what was I thinking? But in the 9th, 10th grade, I'm like, I'm going to Temple. Right. But then as time goes, he's like, no, you're not. You're going somewhere that's a Christian school. Okay. So I remember visiting Oral Roberts. I visited Liberty on official visits, which are basically where the coaches basically pay for you to come visit. And then wasn't really feeling it though, because I felt like it was going to limit me. Like some of those schools had like attire limitations, like you had to dress up till like 4 o'clock. And I'm like, I'm trying to come out of that environment, going to college where, me, my brother, we probably be the only teenagers that were actually like in a suit, not even suits, but like ties going to church, where everybody else is in jeans and stuff. Got you. So to this day, I just don't. I would look like this, going to church. Got you. And that's a whole nother story. But at that time, I lost my train of thought. It's going to come back to me.
You were talking about the type of schools, the different schools.
So we went from Liberty to Oral Roberts to where I ended up at, which was Gardner-Webb University, which was a school in North Carolina. It was in the middle of nowhere. And part of my desire to even want to go there was I've always loved nature. And it was in the middle of nowhere. And so I just saw beautiful mountains. And oddly enough, one of the things that really attracted me to the school was the brick styles of the buildings. Okay. Kind of goes back to thoughtfulness, probably isn't the best word. I can be very, very descriptive in my mind. And there are certain things that could be very peculiar. Okay. I'm like, that I'm latching on to. And I just loved the brick structures. I can still see it to this day, where I'm like, this in my brain is a college experience. Got you. Just based off the structure of the pillars, these white pillars. And I'm like, this is an education environment. Cool. Yeah, like this is cool. This is a school. This is where I want to go. Okay. And then I ended up, like I said, got a full scholarship. It was 80% academic. So that's what I was
that's what I was going to ask. Okay.
Yeah. It was 80% academic, and then track filled in the rest. Okay. And so that's how I ended up at Gardner-Webb.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, I don't think I ever knew that.
Yep.
Okay, so you're there. Now I want to back up a little bit because you hit on church a little bit, right? Suit and tie. You and your brother suit and tie all day, right? Yeah. So you grew up in church.
Yes.
So talk about that.
So I'd probably say my first memories of growing up in church were probably while my biological mother was alive. She ended up passing away in 1990. Where I remember we would go to a church called Power in Faith or Power of Faith, which is off of Park Heights. So it was in the hood, across from Pimlico. And then from there, once my dad remarried, we really got entrenched in a church called Faith Christian Fellowship.
Okay.
And it's still there. It's different pastors now, because I believe our original pastors actually have all passed away. But it's Faith Christian Fellowship across from Randallstown High School in Randallstown. And I would say we grew up there, and I absolutely loved it. I would also say it was during that time where, and I'm thankful for almost everything, but I was really thankful, especially now in retrospect, where it's a very diverse environment. So the pastors were actually white at that time.
Okay.
But I would feel like the majority of it was probably like a 50-50, black and white as far as the body. But the pastors were white. We'd go over their house, everything like that. And so even my style of music to this day, I prefer like contemporary Christian.
Gotcha.
I love guitars, just little stuff like that, where I'm like, choirs, no offense, I'm not a fan of. I can't. It'd just be like, oh my god.
Did you ever come to any of the concerts?
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I
you
did.
probably was sitting there like, I'm just here to support Danielle.
Oh my god.
And Janae and whoever else.
All of that. But even like my mom, she would have that playing, and not like my brother likes that. I just, as time went on, it was just like, oh my god. I couldn't understand what they're saying. I'm like, what are they saying? They're like, when it's 3 people singing, I was like, okay. But everybody, I'm like, I don't. Heaven 600. I'm like, oh my god.
So you're good with Shine FM 95.1?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm okay. I still got some. Me and Erica talk about that all the time. I'm like, we need more songs than the 10 songs they play. But other than that,
you're right.
Other than that, I'm like, okay, I can do this. But I love like solo artists, or maybe a very small group, something like that. But that started then.
Gotcha.
And so I remember seeing these cassette tapes my parents would have called Hosanna. And it's just instrumental music. To this day, I just listen to a ton of instrumental music. Erica jokes on me about that, but I just love instrumentals.
Gotcha.
There's no real words. When we would just walk into the church and that would just be playing. And in my brain, I'm like, this is like heaven. It's just instrumental saxophones and everything. I'm
very
like,
peaceful.
Very peaceful. And so that's how I like to flow. And my student athletes, when they're in my, they already know what's coming. When I'm driving and, we're in a van and they're with me, they already know the type of music it's going to be. To them, it could be very mellow. But it's like, yeah. So, but yeah, so we started there at FCF, had a youth ministry.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the leader at that time that I remember the most would be Mr. Carl Nelson. I actually saw his son, who's got to be in his 30s now and married, last week, 2 weeks ago, for the first time in like 15 years.
Oh wow.
So that was really cool.
Was cool.
It was a great experience. But we were there from, call it, let's say, elementary school to the 9th grade.
Okay.
And so that really shaped a lot of my, I would say, even my belief system and everything like that. Again, even going back with the pastors, it was Dr. Gant and Rhonda originally. And then there was 2 assistants who passed away during COVID, Reverend Jerry Nelson-Stewart and his wife Judy Nelson-Stewart, who I really latched on to. They were old white people that they just like took me in.
Gotcha.
And so not like I was some wayward child. It was just how they just took care of all of us.
Yeah.
So at that age, you just appreciated that. We get candy all the time, after church, but they were also teaching us the word.
Yeah.
And that was like, especially as I've gotten older,
yeah,
like I can kind of go back to that, so to speak.
That's good.
And then once they kind of migrated out prior to the 9th grade, who's still there, Pastor Doolin and his wife, and they're still there to this day, and their families. And so my first true real memories of church that's also where all our friends were. So going over, especially now at this age, you're going over people's houses. Well, they were just everybody that my parents' friends were at the church. Yep. And so it's like, oh yeah, we just hanging out, those types of things, which is for the most part what me and Erica do now, as adults, just without the kids. So that's where it started there. Then it kind of shifted where between really 9th grade until I left for college, for different reasons, my dad had decided to understandably do more street ministries.
Okay.
And so he left the church. Originally it was with the church, but then he ended up going elsewhere, and we would go down to Baltimore City, typically like Saturdays and Sundays, and I don't want to say he was stereotypical, which you may see like somebody out here like, y'all better give your life to Christ.
Right,
It wasn't him, but he was on a microphone.
Okay.
And he was out there very boldly
Wow.
just sharing the love of God.
Okay.
But he would also do it one-on-one.
Gotcha.
He has a real heart for the homeless and the seniors, which I also now have a heart for, particularly the seniors. I don't have as much of a heart for the homeless, but especially, because it just goes back to whatever you tell me to do, you could be 60. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Hey, how you doing? You know, da-da-da. But that came from observing that, so he does insurance. So he's been selling Medicare and all those types of things. So it just kind of evenly connected for him.
Gotcha.
And then as I got older, I just kind of watched how he, you know, kind of handled those relationships, and I do the same thing, you know, so to speak. But it was also, I remember it was one time we were in front of City Hall, so it's not there anymore. But it was a guy threatening him like he was going to kill him, you know, because he's just telling him about Jesus, and he just sit there and take it, you know. So and it brings to my mind, like, I think I was reading it this morning. I think it's Matthew 10, where it kind of talks about like how talking to the disciples, where I'm kind of paraphrasing, where they'll be kind of cast out or in his name because of his name. So it's like, you know, husband against wife, or, you know, child will turn against child. You know, they'll just basically they're gonna come at you. And so, but I saw that, and it's like, you know, he endured. Like, he would just take it. My emotions, especially now, even to this day, like I'm ready to just kind of just clap back. Me and Eric were just talking about this last night. Like, shit, I feel like sometimes you can just be really angry. Like I'm anticipating, like if somebody say something, I'm ready to go off. You know, so but he would just sit there and take it. And that doesn't mean he didn't have emotions. Right. But in those moments, you know, he was able to, and at that age, because you're probably talking, I guess his 40s at that point, really see the bigger picture, where he's really trying to, he can see them for like it's almost like he could see through their soul, where it was just like, you just need Jesus. Me, I'm like, we can deal with that later. You know, you're not going to come at me like this. And so, but having watched that for years, and it had its good, I don't want to say it's bad. It had its positives, and it had some challenges in there, because we then we no longer were really a part of a true church home.
Local church.
And so at that age, I know it impacted my brother and my little sister, but there were also a lot of lessons learned that, at least for me, that I kind of got to observe. And I'd say the biggest one is being able to stand on your own 2 feet. When everybody else is kind of like, I don't want to say against you, but to a degree they're against you. I would always just watch him like just be the peculiar one, so to speak. And so then I embraced that to this day, where I was like, I have no problem, you know, being the one that's different, so to speak. But I would say that was when it wasn't popular. Now it's popular for the wrong reasons. You know, be who you are, all that type of stuff. But it was like then, like, no, we're really trying to stand out to be a true representative of the gospel. Even though I didn't necessarily see it like that at 16, 17, whatever, I felt like it was kind of building me to become that to this day and beyond.
So what were you and your brother doing while your dad was doing that?
Standing right there.
Just standing there?
Standing right there. Little scrawny kid. You know, just standing there observing. Every now and then, like, they would give us tracts to, like, hand out. Every now and then, you know, they'd ask us to pray for people. I don't think we knew what we was doing. But we just do what you told. So it was just like, all right. And so, for the most part, we just standing there observing. Maybe if my parents were here, they might have probably a more vivid recollection of like, oh, no, you was da-da-da-da-da. But the most I can recall, and the one I recall the most, is always in front of City Hall. Where we would be in front of City Hall, and then now it's all been redeveloped, but it's off the corner of, I don't know how familiar with the city, but off of Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King.
It's off of like Martin Luther King and Franklin Street is where that Route 40 almost begins. I can't remember that stretch. And that's where a lot of homeless encampments are even now. But I'm gonna say west of that, where there's a lot of redeveloped homes now, they weren't there. And there was this really big, what those things called? Gazebos. And oh my gosh, I see it. It was so beat up, and the area was very, very run down. And my dad would be right there just preaching. And then there were other times where we'd go off of like Riggs Street, North Cary. I mean, it's straight hood, and there would just be like this open air drug market, and he just walking down. You know, he just talking to people and everything. And I'm like,
That takes boldness.
Oh, it takes.
Ooh, that takes boldness.
It takes some real boldness. He was doing it when like nobody else was. I'm sure there were other people doing it.
Yeah,
but he was doing it, and I got to see him. He was just, and he still does it to this day. Like, he just has a heart, for doing that. Him and my mom, like, they do. We were just up there Sunday, Mother's Day. We were just up there Mother's Day, and just talking to him, and just like when I'm just listening and hearing both of them, it's just like, man, y'all are really, y'all got some crowns and everything. In heaven. Like, and I tell her, like, we need to catch up.
Yeah.
They really out here, so.
That's cool.
But yeah, so.
So, if I recall correctly, didn't your dad marry you and Erica?
So he was my best man.
He was your best man?
Yes, so my pastor.
Okay.
My pastor, who I met him, that had to be probably 08 or 09, through one of my coaching career is so intertwined in my life. I met my pastor through one of my, at that time, student athletes.
Okay.
Who had invited me to a play, or I think she was singing, and I reluctantly went. I remember, I'll never forget, because it was a Ravens Steelers game, and I didn't want to go. So I'm like, I'm about to miss the Ravens Steelers, and so I went, and I was glad I did. I was glad I did, because I'm still there to this day. That's where, and it wasn't to go to join, it was to go support. And I'm like, this guy, he kind of cool, so just listening to him, he's about 10 years older than me. And so it was just like, okay, I just loved his transparency.
Okay.
To this day. And that's a big reason why I'm still there, is I learned through stories, and he's always telling stories. And so real life stories, and which is what I do when I'm coaching. When you're coaching. And so it's just like, okay. And so I knew without a doubt to this day, I knew God really has me there for a bunch of reasons, but that's when I can identify, like, selfishly, not even selfishly, but this really helps me.
Gotcha.
It's just sitting and hearing his stories, so to speak.
Gotcha.
But that was somewhere in 08, 09, if I'm not mistaken. But he's the one who married us. Tyon Horn, he married us.
Okay.
And So.
I just remember your dad, like, just being
right
there.
Yes.
Like, there. And when you said best man, I was like, okay. I knew it was like something like very significant.
Yes.
Just couldn't remember what role it was.
Yeah.
But okay. Well, that's awesome. I love to hear when fathers have great relationships with their sons and vice versa. Because, especially within our Black culture community, so to speak, that's not, common.
It's not. And for me in particular, I'm in an extremely, speaking for myself, I'm in an extremely unique situation. That was actually one of the draws that Erica, when we were dating, that she really admired. Where it was just like we don't need to be, it's not like we don't talk like every day. We don't talk every week. We probably might, I don't even know if we talk every month. But when we're together, like, it's like, we're we're connected. Or he'll just pop by on us because he's got clients in this area. So he'll just pop in, oh yeah, I was just in the area, so, and we just start talking. Or we can just be sitting there saying nothing. And that's actually something that, like, how is this even possible? It's like, we don't need to just sit and talk, like, just wasting, because it's the air. So
Right.
So, how was your day? Like, no, we can just sit there in 15 minutes, like, oh yeah, so like, yeah, that's just what it is.
Right.
But no, I'm so thankful for that. It really grew post college. And truthfully, it came. I would say we got a lot closer a little bit before I got married.
Okay.
That's where it really hit off. So I guess 10 years ago, so 10 to 12 years ago is really where it came about. But I remember, as I got older, I would start asking him real questions. One of them being, I'll never forget, it was my freshman year of college. We were going up Route 301, so not too far from your old stomping ground. And so we was going up Route 301, and I was going off to college. Somehow, for some reason, I asked him, like, why did mom die? My mother. So I distinguished mother and my mom. My mom is my Letitia Elliott. I would say my mother was Mary Lou Elliott. Gotcha. So I was like, but why did she die? I mean, he just started crying. So he started crying, and that was freshman year, so that had to be 2002. 2002. It was 2002. Okay. Call it 12 years after she had passed, and he just began mentioning some things like health, like eating habits, and just little things that were kind of connected to the family, so to speak. Okay. She had passed away from breast cancer at I want to say 35, if I'm not mistaken. And so, but then I asked him again in 2012, while I was dealing with a broken engagement at that time. And the individual that I had been engaged to from my perspective, I felt like she was dying in front of me. Like she was dealing with some real serious mental health challenges.
Yeah.
And so I remember saying that to him. He had came over one day, my little apartment, came over and we were just sitting on the bed and I'm crying like, I feel like, she's dying in front of me. Like, how did you deal with that? Watching mom, kind of, passing away. He started crying again. Now we're talking 22 years later. Where I'm like, dang, that's a sensitive, I don't even say it's something to it, it's a sensitive spot. But one of the things he said to me, he was like, don't ever doubt God. So not that God caused it, because I'm asking questions in my 20s, like, why is this happening? I don't get it. So, and him in his tears is saying, don't doubt God. Like it's always going to be something on our side, so to speak. We're the flawed ones. God isn't flawed, so and we're just basically gonna keep going. And so that has been something that I still kind of will hold on to this day. So I know I'm not gonna understand everything. I'm not gonna try to attempt to overthink everything and try to figure it out. It's just like, all right, well, not that it is, but I will say, well, it is what it is. But I don't mean it like it is what it is. I don't mean it like that. It's just like, okay, well, I just have to keep going, so to speak. So, but seeing that and a bunch of other things, it has kind of like solidified, that relationship. And I just respect them. I respect them more than any other man. So him and his brother, my Uncle Benka, and my pastor, I probably say those three men have had like the most significant influence on me. And I'm thankful because, as you said, when you asked the question, that's not typical in today's world, and it's only getting worse, where the relationship, even with a father or a trusted relationship with another man, that they can kind of submit to, so to speak, it doesn't exist. And that's a big part of the issues that we have in society is because of that.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, okay, well, this goes back to having to be able to stand up on your own 2 feet. Okay, I might be a unique one in this situation. I remember it was one of our men's meetings. I think our pastor had asked like how many men grew up with their father. I was the only man, that raised up his hand, that raised his hand.
Wow.
And so in at times in the moment, I would feel bad for that, where it's just like, because I couldn't relate to a lot of their stories, so I'm like, nah.
Which is actually a blessing.
It is a blessing, yeah. I'm like, nah, I ain't had that problem. Now I'm saying that inside.
Right.
Like, I ain't a problem.
Just like you said it inside the steering wheel. Why the steering wheel keep moving?
So I'm just like, oh, no, I ain't have that.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful, though. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. All right. So going back to, what was the name of the college again?
Gardner-Webb University.
Yes. Gardner-Webb University. Talk about just your lifestyle as a Christian there, right? And I know at some point, I think you transferred to Towson.
Right.
Because that's where I met you.
Yes.
All right. So just talk about your years there as a Christian and just your overall college experience.
I would definitely say, at Gardner-Webb, I got exposed to a lot where I certainly continued to believe in Jesus. My faith walk was there in that regards, but I wouldn't say my lifestyle reflected that.
Okay.
If anything, I kind of cowered at that point. But it was in a quiet way. So it just was like internal. So I remember, never forget, it was my freshman year of college. It was my sophomore year of college where I got exposed to, remember, I walked in the dorm, had a roommate, and for the first time ever, I had even the idea of, never knew what pornography was, anything like that until sophomore year of college. And I walk in my dorm and it's like 6 dudes just around the computer watching like it's a TV episode. And I'm like, yo, what are y'all doing? But I'm like, dang, that look good. But like, what are y'all doing? So oh man, this da-da-da-da. I'm like, and so I walk out.
Yeah.
But it's opened up something.
It's open. That door is open.
And it's like, man, I want to check that out. And so that really led into a deep darkness that I just kept secretive. And I would always just find secretive opportunities to take part in that. And so that really that really messed me up. In addition, this was my first experience. Now I'm going to churches down there and seeing things that I didn't even know took place in churches.
Like what?
Well, one of the pastors at this church that we were at was one of my, he might have been 2 years older than me, going to Gardner-Webb. And he talking about all the girls and women that he's sleeping with in the church. When he's up there on the podium, just like, it was also a different flow where, and this part, how do I say this properly? Like, I've never been a fan. I don't want to say it's the stereotypical black church, but I've never been a fan of hooping and hollering. And
I feel you.
that was my first exposure to hooping and hollering. And knowing his lifestyle, I'm like, that's fake, like fully fake. And so and he's like, ugh, and just like all those deep breaths and everything. I'm just like, what is going on? And there was a lot of, this is down south, so it was a lot of the white man and what the white man doing and white. And I'm like, I had no problems with the white man,
right?
You know, so I grew up in a very diverse, diverse church. I'm like, I ain't got no problem with the white man. You know, the white man ain't doing nothing to me. So it was just like, what is this? And so it was like the church was a gathering to almost like reflect on what had happened maybe the generation prior, or maybe a couple situations that somebody connected to you had in that moment, you know, so to speak.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, oh, this not for me.
Yeah,
And so I stopped going to church.
Okay.
And so I just kind of was just kind of kept it to myself. But I know I wasn't reading no more. I wasn't praying. I wasn't doing anything. It was just, I had this foundation. I know what right and wrong is.
Right.
I know what not to do other than pornography. It was like everything else I wasn't getting involved in. I don't cuss. Like all that type of stuff. I'm like, this is not.
Right.
This is not me.
Yeah.
Didn't go to the parties. That was also never my type because I was still by nature more timid. Anyway, did not sleep around because I always had. Me and Erica would joke about this. I always felt like it'll be my luck. I have sex, pregnancy is happening. Even though I knew a bunch of people around me that never seemed to happen.
Right.
Didn't know what condoms were. Didn't know what condoms. I didn't know any of that type of stuff until I got married.
Right.
You know, so. But in my brain, I'm like,
I would be the one.
Yeah, I'm like, God gonna use me.
Yeah.
And so it was more of a fear thing, and that actually, I gotta add this. Going back to my childhood, how my relationship with my dad changed. Growing up, it was more fear based, much like how I would say the Old Testament, where it was like God kind of worked in fear, with the New Testament being much more of a transition to
grace.
More grace, yes. And so my brain, and it's something I still struggle with now, where it's like I saw God as authoritarian. You do what I say. If you don't do what I say, you're gonna have some problems.
Right.
That was also how I saw my dad. You know, so like you don't do what I say, you get beat. You know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But then as time went on, that changed, and so and I obviously don't see my dad like that no more. But that is something that I struggle with at times, and that's where Erica, who comes in like, oh, God loves me, and da 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 da. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, so I'm like, nah, you better get yourself right. You know, so I'm like, nah, but she just, yes, I can just sing, and I'm like, girl, you need to read your Bible. You know, just little things like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm still kind of working that part out.
Gotcha.
But yeah, definitely during the college years, at Gardner Webb for sure, it was more like, it was kind of locked in. Like we had fellowship of Christian athletes, all that type of stuff, but I also knew the lifestyles of a lot of people there. So it was just kind of like, not that I was in a position to judge, mine just wasn't public.
Yeah.
It was more private. I'm like, okay, I know I need to be somewhere else. Enter in transferring. And part of why I transferred wasn't really that was more of a benefit at the time. I came down with a really bad skin condition, and the doctors down in North Carolina did not know where it came from. So they would just say like, oh, it could be the water, it could be the air. It was a really bad case of psoriasis, and so my skin was growing at very abnormal levels, where I just had a bunch of layers like all over me, and that really killed my confidence so much. So I remember I wanted to take my life. I'll never forget that. That was my junior year of college at Gardner Webb, just laying in bed. Like, I just wanted to end because it was painful. But this is still all internal. I'm not saying anything. This is just all internal. I saw how people looked at me differently. You know, they knew how I used to look, so to speak.
Right.
Like, it was a lot darker. I got darker. It was just scaling. It was
this was everywhere. Your whole body.
Wow. It was everywhere. And I couldn't run anymore, which was my passion. And so it was like, I can't run because moving my limbs was just painful because of the skin. It wasn't the bones or anything. It was just the skin. And so we're ashy. If you just imagine dry skin, like times 100 all over you. And it's just like every movement is just like, oh my gosh. So I couldn't do anything.
So did that affect you academically at all?
Not really. My grades honestly didn't suffer until I got to Towson.
Okay.
And so, but yeah, at that time, my grades were actually still fine.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they were still fine. I don't think I had anything lower than like a B.
Okay.
Other than, I'm glad you mentioned that, Spanish 3, I think it was, because that was also why I transferred.
Okay.
Gardner-Webb required at that time, I hope they changed it, you had to have 3 semesters of a foreign language.
Oh.
And I knew I was not going to make it out that 3rd semester. So I was like, I get out of here. 'Cause I'm not doing this again. I'm not taking it again. I'm never going to pass. So I'm just leaving.
Okay.
You know, so and that was kind of my escape.
Okay.
And so then I transferred, I did a semester at community college. That would have been, time frames. January 2005, I guess. That spring semester, and then I enrolled in Towson the fall of 2000.
My freshman year.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So as I guess as a junior technically, but that really would have been my senior year. But with credits and stuff, I think I was a junior, something along those lines.
Gotcha.
And then at Towson, it was more. I remember linking up with you, and I remember Janae, Regina, and there was a bunch of other people there as well. Because it was like, ooh, they seem for real, you know. So, but I was still gonna keep to myself. I was still gonna stay quiet, but I was just kind of gonna observe.
Gotcha.
And in my mind, at that time, it was something I said to Eric. I was like, wow, there's a lot of pretty girls that love Jesus. And I remember I had questions about the guys though. Going back to my head, I'm like, yo, these guys, but I wouldn't say anything. I'm like, they seem a little suspect. Other than a couple of them in my brain, I'm not naming names. It was just in my head. I'm like. Nah. So I would really just stay with y'all.
Got you.
And so other than a couple friends that I got connected to outside of Towson once I came back, he was having a little Bible study, and so that really began kind of rebuilding my faith, so to speak. And then it was, I guess, 2 years after that when I joined Renewed Minds. And so and here we are now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we met on Zanga, right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yep. It was.
So for those of you who don't know what Zanga is, it was a blogging website. And I actually got connected to a couple people on that website. One of them was you. And I don't know, somehow along the way, we both said that we were attending Towson. Yeah. And then I guess eventually we met in person or whatever, right? So, yeah, that's cool. I tried to go back to find all my blogs one day. Okay. And like the site pretty much is it's non-existent now. Yeah. But I was still able to retrieve my entries. I think.
Oh wow.
I'm gonna try again. Yeah. I'm gonna try again because I was like, I want to look back at stuff just to see where I was at that time. But anyway, okay, so Towson, you're beginning to kind of renew your relationship with the Lord. So at what point did you start to coach? How old were you?
So I would have been 22. So that was my senior year at Towson. It was 2006. So that fall semester, 2006, Coach Albert was my advisor at the time. Okay. And it was okay for you to get your degree. You got to get internship credits. So he just recommended I go back to my high school, see how I could help out. And he was one of the football coaches at Towson. So I just went back. I just did what I was told. I just went back and connected with the principal. He said, why don't you, talk to Mr. Myers, who was my high school coach. Like, see if you help with the track team. Okay. I'm just trying to get my 3 credits so I can get my degree. And so he was actually leaving that year. He was like, I'm not coaching no more. They brought in a new coach, and he was like, you can help him out. Okay. At that time, I was very adamant I want nothing to do with the girls. So I'm just coming to coach the guys. Like, that's it. And so I was just like, all right, fine. So they immediately at 21, 22, gave me, I was the JV coach for the boys team. Okay. But within 2 months, they ended up firing the girls' head coach. Okay. And it was like, you take the girls' team. And I'm like, oh, my God. Like, this is...
No, why were you reluctant to coach the girls?
In my brain, I'm like, girls complain, they whine. Like, it's just, I'm here for business.
Got you.
We are going to execute.
Right.
That's just how, so I wanted nothing to do with the girls.
Got you.
Oh, my gosh. Within like 30 days, I was in love. And I'm just like... Oh man, like they just immediately like flocked to me. Now I also knew at that time it was for different reasons.
Got you.
I'm still close in age.
Still young. Yeah. So
you're talking 16, 17-year-olds and I'm 21, 22. And so it was like, okay. And I wasn't dumb. Some of it, these girls were bold, so it's just like, oh wow. I had parents that would give me heads up, like, oh yeah, my daughter like you, da-da-da-da. And I'm like,
oh gosh.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. So it was a different awakening. Yeah. But my purpose was still I'm just trying to get my degree. So I'm going to do this for a semester, the rest of the year, and I'm out. Yep. But then the head coach for the boys, him and his wife at the time, they got a divorce. They were both on the coaching staff. They left. Okay. So they're like, take the boys team too. And I'm like, so why my grades up? I stopped going to class. Okay. Because I was always going back to the school
Right.
and going to practice. And I did not care that I was missing classes.
Okay.
Because I just began like, I really
To
like this
really
coaching
become
thing. Like, this is,
passionate.
I'm like, this is really cool. So I remember I ended up also shifting my schedules to night classes. Just stopped going to class.
Okay.
And so my GPA was, probably like a 2.2 when
Wow.
all was said and done. Because I had so many failed withdrawals.
Gotcha.
And I finished at Towson by going to like summer school and getting a couple classes. And it was like, all right, I'm done with this.
Right.
But yeah, it was in 2006-ish when I started the internship. And then 2007, I was officially from then on, from 2007 to 2014, the head coach, so to speak, for boys and girls.
Gotcha.
And then I had some awesome assistants who were just teachers, but they were, being that they were already in the school system, that kind of helped handle some of the things that I couldn't handle even at that age. But I'd also began, once I left Towson, I was also working at the bank. I was working at M&T Bank
Oh, yeah,
at night.
that's right.
And so, I would do that at night, go to class, during the day at times or at night. And then I'd have my M&T Bank job at night, go coaching, call it from, let's say, because they got out of school 2:15, so like 2:15 to about 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I'd go to the bank from like 6 to 2, and I just keep doing that. And it was just a
Gotcha.
crazy cycle. My sleep was all messed up, everything. But those were some good times, though. Like, you're
So I
making
remember,
me think about that.
because we were still keeping in touch for a
Yeah.
bit after Towson, or at least after you graduated. And I remember you were so passionate about it. So just talk about what was that flip or that switch for you, because you went from I'm just doing this so I can graduate to, well, I'm barely at school because I love it so much. So what was that switch for you?
Well, I would say the first one was success. So at that time, I want to say it was our second year. I believe our boys team won the state championship, which was never something in my realm of like possibilities. And having gone to Western Tech myself from 98 to 02, seeing how the team had blossomed, I'm like, wow, what could this be if we just keep going? And then, so I'd also gotten more involved in the school system itself. So I had my night job, but I became a long-term substitute teacher. So now I'm developing relationships. I'm the younger, cool, even though I'm not a real teacher,
Right.
but I'm the younger one that everybody's coming to talk to.
Right.
And even now, I'm so thankful where I'm connected to so many people that weren't even on my team. And so it was just like, oh yeah, what's up, Shed? Coach Shed, this, that, and the other. Because I'm a long-term sub for every subject, math, science, computer,
So
whatever.
you're getting to know
So I'm knowing
a lot of
everybody.
students,
I'm getting to know everybody. I'm developing relationships with all the teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And so I ended up doing that for 4 years. So from 08 to 2012.
Okay.
And then I wasn't just at Western, but I would shift to other schools. So Woodlawn, Milford, Lansdowne, Towson. There was a bunch of other schools as well.
Gotcha.
Because I was just looking for some money because I was broke. So it was like, I need to get something to keep doing this coaching thing.
Okay.
Because you're talking coaching is probably for the whole year, maybe $7,000-8,000 for the whole year on the high school level. And so it's like, but I really want to do this.
Yeah,
And so then it was somewhere around, I want to say it was around 2011, 2012, where the principal at that time, Mr. Buddy Parker, had recommended I find a way to become a teacher or something. And so, he put some feelers out there. And so that's what kind of opened up the door for me to become a paraeducator, which is basically a teacher assistant. And so, but I just did that so that I could keep coaching.
Right.
But I never saw, all I saw in my future, and this is something that Erica continues to help me with, I can tend to have very limited thinking. So in my brain, I'm like, I'm going to just be a high school coach forever. Just like that little apartment that I had. I'm going to just live here forever. Like, there's no need to try to be any better. I'm okay with this.
Right.
Like, I'm content with this. And so he's like, no, you need to think bigger. And so I'm just like, okay, well, I'll be a teacher assistant. So I can keep coaching high school. But then once I met Erica, and it was like, okay, I think my eyes were beginning to be opened up to possibly college, so to speak. Well, we'll get there. But yeah, on the high school level, number one, what kept me there was the success. Number two was definitely, it's reversed now, but the relationship piece. Because even at that age, to this day, oh my God, I get emotional when I think about now so many relationships that I have with them. Like think it was 2 weeks ago, one of my young ladies who's in her upper 20s had asked me to talk with her boyfriend, probably future fiance.
Okay.
And so we went up to Centennial Park, talked for like 3 hours.
Wow.
So and he asked me one of those questions about like how I dealt with some things, even coaching high school. And he had to bring something up where I had offended him in like the 10th grade.
Oh, wow.
Very vivid memory for him,
Right.
so he's like, I remember you said this to me and da-da-da-da. And I'm like, wow. And so I just let him, share.
Yeah,
I'm like, well, first off, I was like, although I don't remember any of that, I'm pretty confident I said it. And I was like, I'm pretty confident,
Okay.
so I'm pretty sure I said that.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I'll tell you why. I was like, at that time, my relationship with the track side of coaching was unhealthy because I poured so much of me into coaching. I fully expect y'all are going to be successful if you do everything that I say. So I had to be in full control. So you do what I say, you don't do this, you don't do that, you stay this course, I guarantee you, you're going to run fast.
Right.
And for the most part, that's what happened. And so it was like, if you veer off of that, we got some problems. But that was also because I saw my identity was in how fast or slow my athletes are.
Gotcha.
And so your performance is also dictating how I'm feeling about myself. Now, I'm not walking around telling anybody that.
Right.
I'm sharing this with him.
Right.
So where he was like, my girlfriend at the time, and they're still together to this day.
Right,
I was
I
like,
see.
oh, yeah, I told you. I was like, yeah, you stay away from her. Because I see this one, she about to go to the top. So you need to get out the way.
Okay.
And that's basically what I said to him.
Oh,
and so
got
it was
you.
like, oh, dang, it's like that. And so, but he wanted to get that out so that we could move forward, so which we did. And it was an amazing, awesome,
That's great.
real transparent, conversation about a lot of things. But I'm like, the fact that here we are now, you're talking that had to be 2011 and we're in 2023
Right.
and we're still connected. And I have so many of those. And it's just like, man, like I didn't know that in the moment, like that would produce really. I mean, I got friends, my former athletes. Some of them are I would say they're my friends.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, like God, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, and then me and Erica can now pour into them from a different vantage point, so as they're getting into being married or parents, so many of them are parents, they're going to be helping us.
Right.
I told Erica, I was like, listen, when that day comes, I'm reaching out to all of them. We're not buying no baby stuff. There are too many of them that probably got stuff sitting in closets and everything. I'm like, hey, let me just go ahead and take that off your hands.
Yeah.
So it was like, I'm like, God, this is how you going to provide
Yeah.
for us is going to be, through them. And I'm confident that they'll be more than willing.
That's awesome.
At that time. But of course, you don't know that at 22, 23,
Right.
24, 25, 26
Right.
when I started. But yeah, at Western Tech, it was definitely the relationship piece. Also the parents.
Okay.
The parents really trusted me. And as I get older now, I mean, I already realized it a while ago, but as I got older, I saw how much they truly trusted me. Like I remember there was one time I had a situation, I was working at M&T Bank at the time and had a young lady who would have been 13. So I was probably, it had to be 2008. So I was 23, 24 and texting people, you texting everything like that. I forgot it was a girl, her father calls me like, don't text my daughter late at night. Late, it was probably 8 o'clock or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I ain't meaning nothing like that. But I took some time to think about it. I'm like, 24-year-old texting a 13-year-old. You know how crazy that just... Like,
Right.
that's just, if it was me, I'm like, I'd have probably been up to school. Like, bruh, I don't know who you think you are.
Right.
Like, it's just little things like that.
Yeah.
But I had... Now, that was done in a respectful way.
Right.
It wasn't like somebody pulled me up.
Right.
I've never had any situations like that, which I'm thankful for. But I'm like, I saw how... And to me, that was God's favor. Where it's like, man, like, they would just... trust me. So much could have gone wrong, but it didn't. And I'm in their homes. Like I'd spend the night at their family. I've gone out of this country with families, of my former student athletes, like parents, grandmothers, grandparents, you name it. It's been like I'm one of them. Graduations, and not just school graduations. I had one when she graduated from the academy, the police academy. Like, hey, come through. Matter of fact, I had one was it yesterday? I was at track meet. Yesterday sent me their med school. They wanted me to come to their med school graduation. I couldn't because I was at a track meet. But it's just like nonstop. Wow. Hey, why don't you come?
Wow.
One last week sent me I haven't seen this young lady since 2014. She was probably in the 10th grade at that time. She got a housewarming on June 3rd. Over in like the Pikesville area. Sent me an invitation. Yeah. And I'm at a track meet like, oh my gosh, I have not seen this girl in like over 10 years, and I'm getting an invitation to come to your housewarming.
Yeah, your housewarming.
I'm like,
right.
oh, I'm there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm there. But like, I didn't know. I'll say these things to Erica, and she's always a reassuring point for me. He's like, Shed, you don't know the impact that you had on them.
That's right.
And I really don't. I remember hearing a pastor say a long time ago, and I don't mean this in like some arrogant type of way, but he's like, a lot of gifted people, they don't see their gifts. Like, you can't see yourself, you know, so you don't really see the impact that you have on people. And then a lot of us also don't share the impact. Like, I'm not sharing like, man, Danielle, you have no idea how you impacted my life, da-da-da-da.
Right.
You don't know until you know.
Right.
And so just like, man, I don't be knowing. And so one of the things, actually, well, I'm fast. That's I'll save that for Hopkins.
Okay.
But yeah, so I would say it was definitely the relational, the success, number one, the relationship with student athletes, and then the relationship with the parents that continue to also still go to this day.
Wow. As I'm hearing you talk, I just keep thinking about Jared and just his relationships with his students, with their parents. Yes. How I want to say the oldest that maybe his first year students are at this point would be like in their mid-20s.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, I don't know if he's seen any of them yet.
Got you.
But all that to say, I just know that, like you were just saying, when you have such an impact on students like that, they will remember you and they will invite you to things and just, you know, like you said, you spoke to your student athlete's boyfriend, and I know for sure marriage was you know spoken about in that conversation. That's why y'all so the fact that they trust you with something so that's big, like, hey, I want you to talk to my soon-to-be husband and kind of pour into him, like that's huge. So I love that.
It's amazing. I would say to now my oldest are probably like 34.
Wow.
They're in that 34. One, I remember he had dealt with considered abortion due to their child was going to be, they were 100% sure would be born with birth defects. And he wanted to come connect with me to talk about it, you know, so I'm talking about my stance on abortion. However, we had to really like flush out those emotions because in his him and his wife had two difference. He didn't want one, you know, but his wife dealing with it, it was a challenge for her. And so he's like, hey, man, I just need somebody to talk to you. And I'm like, man, the fact that you would come to me, you know, so we just walked around a park up in Harford County, you know, he doesn't even live over here. He just I'm going to come see, I'm going to come to you.
Right.
And so we just walked and talked about it. And it's like so many will do that now. And I'm real thankful for that. To this day, and so that also builds me. It kind of builds my confidence to keep going, because I can get really down on myself in my current state at Hopkins, and I will reflect on those reflective experiences from Western Tech, where you're talking 30, 31, 28. All of them now are in that 26 to 34 range, and it's like, okay, all right, God, you know, I saw how some of them worked out down the road.
Right.
Let me keep going.
Yeah.
Because every year I'd be like, man, screw this, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, so,
right. Yeah, I'm glad that God helps us to remember those who are actually doing well, you know, because it can be discouraging when, you know, things don't always work out the best.
Right.
So I want you to talk about Johns Hopkins. At what point how old were you when you transferred there? What inspired that?
So that would have been, so that was 2013. That was 2013 when I reached out to Bobby. I'm pretty sure it was. I think it was. It had to have been 2013 or 2014. So that must have been, let's call it 28, 29, or somewhere around there, where I sent him a Facebook message because we were Facebook friends, and I did not know why. But we were Facebook friends. I'm like, hey, I'm really interested in coaching on the collegiate level, because I knew I was getting married, and I figured I needed a career. And so in my brain, I'm like, what I did, actually I have to backtrack. And so what I did at that time, probably about maybe a few days before, I was praying in the spirit. And it was almost kind of like random, where I just started Google searching in Maryland colleges. And I'm like, I would go through each roster of the staff, so the coaching staff. And I saw at Hopkins, they didn't have a sprint coach listed. So, like, you know, Maryland had sprint coaches, UMBC had sprint coaches, Towson had sprint coach. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try Hopkins. Plus, it's 2 miles from where I'm living. So I'm like, this is a win-win. And in my brain, I'm like, this gotta be a full-time job. So that's what I need right now. Because I had also told one of the schools I was at that time, I'm not doing this no more. So we connected. Came to find out when I was in high school, so fast forwarded about 10 years prior, he was a teacher at my high school, hence why we were Facebook friends. And he was like, hey, I've kept track of you for so long. I want you to do what you've been doing at Western Tech here. So let's make it happen. So I'm like, oh, listen, I mean, we talked twice, 2 different meetings. I remember I made big old videos in my brain. I'm like, I got to have these interview packages together. So I made videos, I got stuff together, like make me your sprint coach. And I remember he was like, okay, so now that we did all that, let's talk the money. And I'm like, okay, yes, I'm like, salary, here we go. He's like, I probably got about $4,000 for you. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
gosh, I'm like, I'm about to get married. Now, again, this is all internal.
Right.
So I'm keeping this inside, and I'm like, oh, man, I really thought I was supposed to be here.
Right.
Again, in my head. And so I remember I left there. Erica was my fiance at the time. So I'm walking down, I think it was Charles Street, and I called her like, so it's only going to be like $4,000. I was like, but I really want this job. Like, I bought into his vision. You know, so one of the things he had said to me, he was like, I feel like within 3 years, you'll be full-time somewhere. Even if it's not here, it'll be somewhere.
3 years.
So he was like, give me 3 years. And so
okay.
I was like, okay then. I'm gonna believe him. And so Erica was like, hey, if you believe God's telling you to do that, do it.
Wow.
So I did. I accepted it.
Wow.
Didn't take me long, think about it. And so, so that was in June-ish of 2014. Because I think I was officially listed as starting as like July 2014.
Okay.
But I was very nervous. I was very nervous because the culture I came from at Western Tech was probably, let's call it 95% black as far as my team. And Hopkins was going to be the exact opposite of that. And then also the type of student athlete was going to be an exact opposite of what I was dealing with at Western Tech.
Yep.
And so I remember I ended up meeting with a BG, who at the time was the sprint coach at George Mason University. I had developed a relationship with him through one of my former student athletes on her college search, so to speak. And so I drove down to Virginia. We went to this little bar to get some wings and just talk about how I'm like, I don't know what to do. I was like, I've never had to coach like white people before, so, like for real. And so, and so he gave me all these tips, which wasn't like, this is how you coach white people.
Right.
It was more the science of just speed in general, just training for that in general, which I never was. Part of why I struggled even with my schooling, taking me really 6 years. I kept failing classes. I had my failed withdrawals, but I had I struggled in science from elementary school onwards. I always struggled with science. And so the science of speed was a concept for me. Like even now, it's something that I struggle with. I'm a lot better, but like cells and that, I'm like, what? This stuff don't make sense to me. A lot of the success I had was a lot of trial and error when I was coaching high school. It was like, okay, this don't seem to be working. Let's try this. Okay, let's do this. And so that's where, that kind of came about there. So anyway, so we get to talk and I get my stuff together. And then I ended up immediately connecting with a lot of the upperclassmen over the summer. I began reaching out to the upperclassmen that were going to be on my team. Okay. And I remember I sent them these surveys, and I'll never forget one of the things that I had asked them, knowing that I'm going to come in and create a new culture, because there was no sprint coach before. Okay. It was actually a really good guy, great guy. He was the pole vault coach. He was a little bit older, a lot older, but he was doing double duty, part-time. Most of the coaches there were retired because there wasn't much money. So they don't need nothing. So it was just like, oh, yeah, we just here. So I'm like, okay, if I have to go about creating this culture that I want, I also need to know what they're looking for. So I sent out these surveys and I asked them, like, what do you need from your coach? The number one common denominator was somebody that cared for them, which blew my mind, because in my brain, I'm like, I didn't think that would be what 18 to 22-year-olds, and specifically I sent these to juniors and seniors in college, so call it 21 and 22-year-olds. I didn't think that's what they'd be looking for. I thought they'd be looking for a technician and all this type of stuff. And I'm like, well, if there's anything I can do, it's that.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, 'cause that's what I've been doing, coaching high school. Yep. So I'm like, okay, this will be good. And so when we got there, it wasn't good. It was it was very challenging. Like, it was good, but the different dynamic was really hard for me to figure out.
Now, as far as age goes, ethnicity goes, what was it?
Both.
Or was it both?
It was both. And so I remember at that time, the first real meeting I had at our track. I put everybody in a big circle. I might have had, let's say, 30 to 35 people there. Call it maybe 4 black people there. And I was like, all right, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and state the obvious. I'm black. y'all are white. I was like,
leave it to Shedrick
Oh,
just to be straightforward and honest, which I love about you, by the way.
It's straightforward.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is gonna be a learning experience for me.
Yeah.
Immediately, I offended people. Immediately, which was a new concept for me. I'm sure I might have offended high schoolers, but I would have never known because they're not gonna say nothing. You 13, 14, 15, 16. Again, it was a different time in today's world where everybody's voice matters, where it was just like, now, oh no, how dare you say this? I'm just being honest. And so now it's a fear of maybe I can't be honest no more. I can't be truthful no more. I'm going to have to kind of like quiet this, so to speak, to appease 18 to 22 that might be uncomfortable.
And these are men and women?
These are men and women.
Okay.
Yep, these are men and women. But it was primarily the women.
Okay.
And so at that time. Now, there were also plenty, please don't get me wrong, that were very receptive, so like it was something new. And there was very much so a honeymoon period because it's something new. And it's like, hey, we have somebody that's just ours, so let's go out here and, make it happen. I want to say maybe like four girls quit within like 2 days, within like that first week.
Okay.
There's a good bit that quit, which I took personal. Now that it could have had nothing to do with me,
right?
But I took it personal. I'm like, well, I'm the new person here,
right?
And now y'all walking away,
right.
It's got to be me. Again, still keeping it to myself, so to speak. Now, when I say the year was terrible, that's not the right word. It was more our performances on the track in my brain because I was used to so much success on the track coaching high school, and I'm like, oh, this is different. And so that was a challenge because I also identified myself based off the success or lack thereof of my student athletes. And so I remember my first year, I was like ashamed to even walk around with like anything that said Johns Hopkins track. Because in my brain, I'm like, yo, we suck in the sprints. In my brain. I know some people are probably going to be offended by this. Hopefully I hurt your feelings. But at that time, it was just like, man, what I was used to, I'm like, this isn't it.
Right.
But as time went on, I had to take a responsibility for it and to a degree disassociate how I saw myself based off their performances. I'm like, we could stay here forever and I'm gonna just be thinking bad about myself forever. So I got to do something about it. I had to learn some things. But then there were also some things along the way that I would say really God kind of intervened to help me to push to keep going.
Okay.
Because a lot of times the hardest part really is starting and staying even in that start phase.
Right.
Call it the first year is the start phase. I'll never forget, we were going in the weight room one day and it was one of the throwers at the time. His name was Mitch. And I'm walking behind them and he pulls me to the side and he was like, hey man, I just want to let you know, like, we've been praying for a coach just like you. I went to my car and busted out crying. I was just like, I'm like, oh, for real? I'm like, oh man, that's what's up. Hey, I'll be right back. And then I went to my car and just like, oh my God, like, they really. Okay, he's a thrower. I don't do nothing with the throws. I know nothing about shot put, discus.
Right.
But he's just some random thrower, just like, hey, we've been coaching, we've been praying for somebody like you.
Wow.
I'm just like, okay, God, all right, I gotta get through this. And then I began having real conversations, particularly with the upperclassmen. I had relationships with my freshmen too, don't get me wrong. But it was really with the upperclassmen because I already know as a coach, they have the influence. So I need to get connected to who already are the leaders here. And we got to find a way to meet like in the middle. Because once that group is out, so to speak, that's really where you can kind of make it completely yours. But I need them to really get what I'm looking to interject, so to speak. And truthfully, we're all looking to do the same thing.
Right.
We might just be seeing it from a different way.
Right.
But I also needed their help because I didn't know anything about Hopkins. So it was like, I need y'all to teach me really what life is like as a student athlete here. I'm used to a high school. Like, I was also not used to such a priority on academics where it was just like everything is, I'm maneuvering what I'm doing based off of your academic schedule. I was like, no. Like when I coached high school, we get out at 2:15. You want to go see the teacher? No, you're not. You should have did that during your lunch break. Even though it was only 30 minutes, you still got to eat. I didn't care. You're not doing it after school. That's my time. You know, so and that was the norm then. And at Hopkins, no, it's you go to office hours, you go see your professor, you got to meet with your group project or whatever. Practice is going to take a back seat. And so I'm just like,
oh wow.
Now it doesn't bother me at all.
Okay.
At that time, first year in, it's like, oh, this is, and we're not running well. I'm like, oh, this is. I'm like, this not good. And so yeah, that first year was tough. But some of those relationships that were developed then, to this day, I still have. One of those young ladies, I only had her for her senior year. Her name was Emily Warner. It's Emily Press now. Never forget, this would
she's
have
married
been,
now.
she's married now. She's married now, and this would have been, oh man, Jesus. This had to be 2019 when she got married, because that same day, my pastor's mentor had tragically passed away. He was in a car accident, and I had just found out as I got off the plane. This was November of 2019, and I just found out. I had only met him for, call it 3 months, but he had a really lasting impact. His name was Dr. Dimitri Bradley. Had a real impact on me. I still listen to a lot of his teachings. He had an app. Like, I had never heard somebody teach that way before. So anyway, that happens. I go in the hotel. I'm not telling nobody, though, other than Erica. I'm in the hotel crying. I get an email from Emily like, hey, Shed, you can tell me no if you want, but I want you in my wedding. Like, in my wedding.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm just, this is via email. She's like, you were always a mentor to me, this, that, and the other. Like, I want you to be a part of my wedding. Da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, oh, my gosh, you have no
Mixed
idea.
emotions.
Oh, man.
My
I'm like, on this day, I'm
right.
like, just to be, that was a first time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, my gosh. Now, COVID ended up throwing a wrench in it because it was going to be June of 2020. And so they ended up doing a digital wedding. So I was a part of it just via Zoom. Where she wanted me to read like some scriptures, say some things. So I just did it on Zoom, so to speak. So, but like having her for that 1 year and then just even like, hey, I want you to be a part of my wedding. Was just like, oh my gosh.
Especially your first year, right?
First
like
year.
I had that sort of impact because I was going through a lot.
Man, I was definitely, going through a lot. And so I remember her brother had passed away during that time of her senior year. And it was just like so many of those types of situations, not to that degree, but creating those connections with the ladies and the guys. One of the guys, Corbin Yap, I went to his wedding on my birthday last year, 2022. Where it was up in Philly. And so I was like, man, you got to know you mean something to me if I'm coming on my birthday to your wedding, which was on a Sunday too. And so I was like, I got to go to work tomorrow. But, he wanted me there. And so obviously me and Erica as well. But that was from my first year. And so then from there, it has definitely had some ups and downs. But I would say the relational piece has been more like this. Just the experiences on the track are probably more like that, but the relational piece goes that way, so to speak.
And would you say that's the bigger picture?
Oh, it is. 100%. Going back to my time at Western Tech, where knowing impact you've had on them, but also the impact that they've had on you, and I have to kind of share that, so to speak, and especially now at Hopkins, like I had one of my young ladies yesterday. We were down in where were we? Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, and I didn't say everything I wanted to say to her because there was a bunch of other people around, and I didn't want to get too emotional. But I simply summarized it. I was like, "Whoo, girl! One thing that you are is Mrs. Consistent. She's very consistent in her performance. She's very, very stable in the way that she carries herself. And I've shared with her before how." I was like, you have no idea how much of an impact that has on me, is you being here versus here. I'm not the type that likes to, so a lot of coaches, especially track coaches, they like to debrief with their student athletes after their performance. I don't want to talk. There's nothing to talk about in my brain because it's just going to be emotions. You're going to be, especially if it didn't go well, it's going to be emotions. You and me, so it's just like, we don't need to talk. If we do need to talk, we can talk hours later or days later. A lot of times we don't have but a lot of times we've all moved on by that time, which is what I prefer. Where it's just like, hey, let's keep it going. But in her case, even when I do talk to her afterwards, she's typically here. And so I'm like, man, like when I'm able to interact with somebody here, it better helps me deal with somebody that's
Absolutely.
Here. But if I have a whole bunch of here, I'm eventually here. Or this that's already in me comes out. Where I typically am able to stay here while somebody else is here. And so those interactions, like with her, and like I had one of my guys from every time he comes over, we last hung out I want to say 2 months ago. He's married now. His name is Jesse. Erica always reminds him, like, you have no idea. I had him from 2014 to 2017, where this was his typical demeanor, and that helped me manage some of the other guys or some of the ladies, et cetera, et cetera. But I need people, God knows, I need people like that for me to want to keep going. Part of, not to go too far back, but even part of why I left coaching at Western Tech, in addition to the primary dynamics of my life changing, it was the relationships were changing with the student athletes, but also in their case, their parents. I didn't feel like their parents trusted me anymore. And so it was like, okay, it seems like this is gone. I think this is God. This is my signal to like, it's time for me to, it's time for me to go. That was also what I always had in my head. The day comes for Hopkins, whether it's true or not. In my head, I'm like, once they no longer, it doesn't seem like there's a trust factor here. It's time for me to go. It's time for me to go do something else. And that temptation is every year, though. So that temptation is every year. And I throw out there because I'm about to go be a cop. So I was like, I'm about to go be a cop. So I'm seeing these salary signs. I know they desperate. So like, I know they desperate.
Hilarious.
They put up these $10,000 bonus, sign. I'm sure there's some fine print. I'm like, I can go do that. No, I'm not gifted for that. But just in my frustrations, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is so much. And dealing with a lot of some of their challenges, and then having to, in some cases, you got to keep things confidential, but it'll be a burden. And so that's also what I feel like has helped me connect more with my pastor. Okay. Where I remember coming to him one time, I think I told you, even Jared, about this last time, where it was just like, man, Pastor, I don't want to make it seem like my coaching journey is like pastoring, but I'm coming to you about X, Y, and Z.
Oh,
and
yeah, I
like,
remember this. Yeah.
And he's like, first off, don't bemoan or, put that down. He's like, no, it's very much like, you know, pastoring and everything like that. Like, you're just managing a different age group. But it's very, very similar. And so it's just like, my gosh, like this, I don't want to do this. So like, I don't want to do this, but I do want to do it. But I don't want to do it. But I do want to do it. So it's just, but having people that can share their stories and give me like real life in the moment examples, their emotions, their feelings, like, oh, okay, so I'm not off when I want to just walk away from this. The thought comes in my head to want to walk away from this, so it's like, oh, you be battling that? Why you sitting up there, encouraging everybody? I'm like, I would have no idea. Just like I'm sure there's a bunch that are connected. They would have no idea, the thoughts that go through my mind. And so one of the things that's done, part of why I brought my book bag was not that they know. Well, I think they have an idea of what encourages me. I tell them, like, although I need money, I was like, I don't want your money. I don't want like gifts or anything like that. Really, the gifts that I desire from them are writings of memories, because I need that to go back to help encourage me going forward. I think it's somewhere in Psalms where I think I'm paraphrasing, where I think God talks about remembering to a degree. My context might be off, like the days of old, but he would remind them, like, remember how I did X, Y, Z. Remind them how I did da 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 da. That's to kind of bring it some encouragement for you to keep going.
That's right.
And so oh my gosh. So this was 2 weeks ago. They gave me a calendar.
Okay.
They gave me this calendar, my current student athletes, and I told them, I was like, I'm not going to go through it until I know I need to be encouraged. Okay. And I knew last night. I was about to ask. 2 nights ago. Okay, so 2 nights ago. I was going to need to be encouraged. So they gave this to me 2 weeks ago, and I began reading it. So what they did was basically a bunch of them took memories from days that I had an impact on them over the course of their 4 years. And so then they just kind of wrote it in.
So sweet.
And I'm reading these things just, oh my god, this is so crazy. Like, they just putting them in. Like, I remember when you talked to me about da 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 da, and I'm like, for real?
I love this.
Like, you remember that? So I was just like, oh my gosh, like it's just so. It was just like, you talk about creative. I'm like, this is a memory keeper. And so it was just like, oh my gosh. I
love that.
It was such a beautiful, and they started with this because like, I'm always talking about being grateful, thankful, being blessed. And it was just like, my gosh. Like,
they listen.
Because I definitely don't, I'm like, y'all don't be responding to stuff.
Yeah,
like all these messages I send out.
Text. You saw my text.
I know you saw it. I also know it says read. And it's just like, what in the world?
Wow, that's so good.
So then to kind of go back, and see that, I'm like, man. Thank you. I literally was laying on the hotel bed. Today is Friday, so that was Wednesday night. It was Wednesday night. I'm going through it, then I woke up at like 4 a.m. and I'm reflecting on what I read. Start crying again. And it's like, oh man, God, thank you so much. That. So it's just things like that.
Wow.
And that's typically multiple times over the course of the year. Now, at the end of the year, they'll give it maybe in like a gift form, but every now and then, and so I'll screenshot messages that if somebody sends me something, I'm like, I need to save this because I know I'm gonna need to look back on something. Discouragement's gonna come somewhere down the road. So I need to go back and look. Oh man, this is how I help this individual, and not that it's for that individual. I could be dealing with this person, but me seeing that is now helping me deal with this person. And so that's
so good. I love that.
That's what keeps it going. Yeah.
I love that. Wow. That's awesome. So I'm reminded, I want to say it was your second or third year where you actually lost a student,
Yes.
right? So I want you to hit on that, right? And just talk about that whole experience because that was still early on.
Yes.
And alongside that, I want you to talk about how important sharing your faith was at that point, because you already share your faith, right? So just talk about generally how important it is to you that you share your faith with students either way. But then also talk about that situation with the passing of your student.
Okay. So I'll go backwards with the pass. So I'd actually had a situation prior when I coached high school, 2013. David Hassan, I remember he passed away as a freshman at Hampton. He drowned in a pool. And that was my first, that was 2012. That was 2013. Because I remember I got a message on Facebook from one of my former athletes at the time, messaged me like, please pray for David, like something really bad has happened, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm praying, not knowing, but within like a couple of hours, found out he was actually already dead. And I got to go to practice the next day. Well, not that day, the same day, and share this with my team, even though I'm sure they were finding out because Facebook was really big at that time. So people were, kind of communicating. So I'll never forget going down into that bottom hallway where we would meet and not knowing how I'm going to, share with the team what they already know, but how I'm going to lead a team that's grieving, even though he's no longer on our team. He just was like 4 or 5 months prior. How are we going to deal with this? And so that was like my first dealing, so to speak, with a death of a even though it was a former teammate, he was still fresh. So I remember at that time we did like our own little memorial in the parking lot at the school, and then his funeral was actually at my old church, Faith Christian Fellowship, which I hadn't been back to since like my 9th grade year. He apparently, I think he went there, and so they asked for 3 people to speak: his father, Pastor Doolin, and myself. And which was an honor, so I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so I used that opportunity to share funny memories of David, because at that time he wasn't on he stopped competing. I think I might have cut him after his sophomore year, but he became my video manager. And so he would always record videos for me, and he would always be talking in the background. And I'd be like, "Yo, Dave, I don't want to hear you talking, man. Like, shut up. Just record." So he's, "Oh, okay," just doing commentary. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And so I'm sharing stories with that. I remember I made a whole compilation of any video that I had of him running, but also videos of him talking. And I gave it to his parents on a flash drive. So I'm like, you could have these continued memories, and his dad was actually is a pastor. So that was really, really hard for them. And so that was 2013. 2017, it was July 13th, 2017, when Abby, I'll probably always butcher her last name, I want to say Baston, passed away. She had fell off of a high building close to Hopkins campus. And I remember, never forget, Erica got a flat tire that day, and took her car, she took mine, and I'm stuck off of Russell Street across from the stadium, just waiting for the tow trucks to come. And so, they come, but my boss is calling me like, we really need you to like get here like now. And I'm like, I gotta wait for Erica's car. So they didn't want to tell me over the phone, but eventually they had to tell me over the phone because I was still there forever. So they tell me I get to campus, thoughts are now just flooding because it was like, I think they said she had been found almost like half naked behind the building. So your mind is wondering, like, what exactly happened? And it's like, this is one of my babies. And I had just last saw her maybe 2 days before. It was on a Sunday. I'll never forget. It was a Sunday. She worked at Towson Bagel. And I had found out not too long prior to that, I was getting promoted. Talk about those 3 years. It was exactly 3 years where I did get the full-time job. It just took 3 years.
Took 3 years.
She was the first person I told of my student athletes in person. So I went to her Towson Bagel, told her, and she said, "Oh my gosh, Ed, I'm so happy for you, da 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 da." That was that time I saw her, and I think it was that Tuesday. I think that was July 13th, when I got the call and everything. And so then from there, it was just a flooding of people reaching out. Is it true? You know, so because this is the summertime, so there aren't too many people like still on campus, so to speak. And so I remember I had one that I had a little bit of a rocky relationship with, called me from like Ireland or London or something. You know, so like, Shed, is it really true? You know, da 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 da. And so, you know, I'm just being more of I'm verifying what's true, while also just hearing their grief, so to speak.
And still processing
And still processing my own grief.
Wow.
And I remember that same day I met her parents for the first time. They came down from Ohio. I had never met them before. So they came down from Ohio, and I remember I'm driving them around, particularly her mom, her biological mother, and I'm hearing her tell her brothers, telling Abby's brothers that your sister, she's gone. And they were young, you know, so these were little boys, and I can hear them on the, like, they don't know what that really meant. But the pain that she felt was just like, oh, I had never seen that, you know, before. And to be experiencing it firsthand, while also still trying to communicate with my student athletes who were having a different type of pain, but it's pain, you know, losing their for some of them, their best friend, you know, everything like that.
Wow.
So I remember that night we had a memorial service like on the spot, just to give people the opportunity to just, you know, grieve, whatever the case may be. But it was also then where I was kind of thrust into a different type of limelight, so to speak, where that same day that it came public, you know, that, well, she passed, was also going to be the day that it was going to be publicized that I had been promoted to full time. But obviously they chose not to do that, understandably. But I remember our athletic director at the time, everybody was reaching out to me, the real media, in regards to how do you want to handle the situation. In my brain, I'm like, this is really my first day on the job full time. And I'm like, I'm just an assistant. But it was like, how do you want to go about doing this?
Wow.
Okay. They kind of coached me on what to say and what not to say necessarily to like media or police, whatever the case may be. But it was like, I'm the newbie. But I also saw that I'm like, okay, God, you're using me somehow, some way to kind of be the forefront to a degree, so to speak, to kind of handle the situation and help our student athletes, really the Hopkins community, move forward, you know, through this. But in order for us to move forward, we had to deal with it. We had to really embrace that pain. I remember you and Jared were a part of that.
Yeah.
You know, so if I recall correctly, I don't know if you had a dream or something like that in regards to Erica was gonna like hit you up or something like that, just to kind of provide some sort of but you didn't know what it was. But she was gonna reach out to you in regards to like, hey, Shed is dealing with something, and I need some help.
I think I remember.
And so I remember we came over, I think the next day or that night. It was something like that, and then that's when I began to share everything that I was dealing with. And that was a big encouragement for me, us to keep going, you know, to deal with it. And so we ended up going to the funeral, which is in Ohio. But I remember one of the things I had to do to help me process it was I had to travel by myself. So most of our kids flew, and her family was willing to like assist with all that. They actually housed us. We probably had maybe 25 people go, and they had a hotel that they paid for all the rooms. But I drove because I was like, I need to be away from everybody else, so I can really let out all my emotions. Right. And so because I knew at the funeral I was gonna have to be Mr. like kind of take care of everybody. Yeah. So I had to have my moments, and I remember I lost it at the burial. In my car, as I saw one of my team captains, she finally lost it. She was outside being with the team, and then once they put her body down, she lost it. And I'm in my car, I lose it. You know, so it's just like, oh my gosh. And even though that was 6 years ago, it's still a very sensitive spot. Yeah. You know, like I still think about it. I still think about her. I'm thankful to God in this regards, where I'm very much so connected to her family. And so I go up there every June. We'll be up there about 3 to 4 weeks from now, where they put on a commemorative race in her honor. And I've been going every year. I go up there. And so Erica's come. She'll come this time. She's come like two other times. But I make sure I go every year, even through COVID. We went. But we've become like a family, you know, so which has been amazing. I've watched those boys that were here. They got to be at least 6 feet now, you know. So like, I mean, one of them messed up my ankle. We playing basketball last June. It's still jacked up. Crossed me up so bad. His mom had it on video. I'm like,
oh man, not on video.
Oh my God, it was so bad. And you just hear me, and he's like, dang. I was like, oh God, and I just limp off like,
oh man.
And you just thinking it like, no, this was a serious. He messed me up.
He really messed you up.
He gave it to me, and so Erica just asked me not too long ago. She was like, "Are you gonna go up there and play again?" Because you know your pride. I was like, no, I'm done. I was like, I'll just stay in the back. And that's it. I'm not doing anything because that's always been our like tradition now. You know, that was 5 years. This will be the 6th. When we play basketball, then we'll go do the commemorative race. You know, so to speak. Her, Luke, her stepfather, and her mom Kelly, and then we just connect like as if we're a family.
Wow.
You know, and I've been thankful through that process where we've gotten closer. I mean, we've talked about in-depth subjects. You know, I mean, racism, grief. I remember it was like 2-3 years ago. I'm talking about grief. Like they can really kick me out this house. I think it was actually last year or 2 years ago, where I'm talking about like processing grief, and they had still had different perspectives even in their marriage, and they were willing to share this with me. And I'm sure I probably did say some stuff that might have been like, "Who are you?" You know, to say that. And I know sometimes I'll say something. But oh, nothing happened. Okay, you know, so now that's internal,
right?
But I'm like, but then that kind of gives me a little bit more confidence. You know, I'm like, okay, well, and I'm not saying anything in some crazy, you know, type of way. But it's like, okay, you know, they're at least hearing me out. They can be completely disagreeing, but they're at least hearing me out, which also builds my confidence. Going back to when you asked about sharing your faith, it builds when there's always going to be deflectors,
right?
But when you have some situations where they're at least willing to hear you,
yeah,
even if they are, I don't buying nothing that you're saying. Okay, well, it's not too bad for me to try this again. Remember, this was in maybe 2019. One of my young ladies, at that time, I actually don't do this much now, probably not even at all. But at that time, I would send a lot of things. I would send scriptures, all kinds of stuff, but it would be packed up in stories via email. And I would send it to a bunch of them. I remember my team captain at the time, she wrote me back one day like, "I just want to let you know I don't believe any of this, but please keep sending it."
Okay.
And that resonated with me. I'm just like, what? That don't make no sense.
At
but
all.
It was just like, first off, thank you so much for even being like this honest. But then it's still like, hey, but still send it. And so I'm just like, okay,
it's
then.
Doing something.
So it's like it's got to be it's something, you know, that's
something
kind of going on.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I would do things more as like a group. Now it's definitely more like one-on-one. And honestly, I feel like this might not be accurate, but this is the approach I've taken where I've been more trying to solidify those that profess to be Christians. I don't want them to fall off. Versus I'm even going after like new ones. It's like, please don't walk away. You know, from the faith. I literally was having a conversation yesterday, 2 days ago, with one of my girls, and I just simply, I remember she said some stuff, and I put my hand on. I was like, please just don't be deceived. I just said it very, very gently. You know, he was talking about a bunch of stuff, and I was just like, please just don't be deceived. As you get older, I was like, please don't be deceived. Like this world is really, churches are accepting a lot of things that aren't biblical
at all.
So please just don't be deceived.
Yeah.
And that's part of that though is because at a school like Hopkins, which is, I don't even know how, liberal, whatever I don't know what the terms are, the political, everything like that, it's such a small remnant, and they could be easily pulled away. And I'm thinking about my experience when I was in college, where it wasn't like where they are now. It was nothing like this. Like we could have said what we need. First off, it was a Christian school. It was just people, we just didn't act like it.
Right.
And so, but it's like, okay, you're at a school, and if you really do stand by God's word, a lot of what you're saying is going to be the exact opposite of what is being promoted in this environment, which can ostracize you or at least weaken your faith and kind of cause you to coward, you know, so to speak.
Right.
And so those that I'm aware of, you know, so like I had one young man, he didn't probably know why I was saying this. This was Sunday, Mother's Day. Met his parents for the first time. This is a bold young man that, I mean, he is bold in his faith.
Okay.
He's freshman, rising sophomore. And so, and I've watched this whole year. Met his parents for the first time Sunday. And I went up to his parents, and I just simply was like, oh man, these your parents? I was like, I just want to thank y'all. Y'all have done such an amazing job with your son. He is going to be an amazing young man. Like he is doing some great things. Now, I didn't know I have no idea where their faith is or anything like that.
Right.
But he's standing right there, halfway, like he's smiling, but like, oh man, thanks, coach. You know, so kind of to that degree, I was like, but I'm so excited what I'm going to see out of him over these next 3 years. Now, really, I was talking about what I see him like. We're in these group meets where he's, you know, sending out scriptures, encouraging other believers or at least professing believers, you know, in this age group. And I'm in there. I like to just sit there and just listen, you know, so to speak. I'm not trying to take the lead of anything. I'm just more background support if you need it, so to speak. But Sunday just trying to encourage, like, okay, all right, man, this guy, he's going to be and he reminds me of some other former athletes that I've had who ultimately struggled as they got older. And so it's like, okay, I'm gonna make sure we do right by you. So let's get this encouragement. Let's get this foundation. Because a lot of times, some of the most powerful tend to that they can get taken out, at the knees, and then that fall really does some real damage. And so, and we've had some situations like that. And so it's like, okay, God, I'm not trying to use that. Why I said this might not be the right way. It's just the way I've kind of chosen to go, where I'm focusing more on those that profess to, like, let's solidify you, because in my brain I feel like it's going to be them that are really going to get that age group, as I get older and I start getting grays, because I got a couple, man. My voice can kind of get tuned out, so especially because I don't know the things of this age, so to speak. And I'll joke about them, like, one of the music, I have no idea who these people are, so like I'll be like a little this, little that, little who. I'm like, oh my God, all these littles, and so it's just like, this is some ridiculousness. And so, I'll do it in a joking way, but like that's their world, like beyond Instagram. They be showing me all the TikTok. I don't know about none of this stuff. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. So it's like, okay, well, if I can be connected to some of you all that are believers, ultimately it can be your boldness that kind of influences or at least it's planting a seed, or it's watering, whatever the case may be, that somewhere down the road, whether it's 27, 37, whatever, all right, I'll kind of go about it. And then when my opportunities come for a newbie, so to speak, one-on-one, I'm going to take it. So I'm going to definitely take it. And I've done that. I've done it with a few. Did one early this year, early this fall, rather, with a young lady. She heard me out, so she heard me out. And it was weird because she's like, well, one of my friends was just telling her about Christianity, like, all this, da-da-da-da-da. And so I'm just like, okay, I'm in a mode now where I'm really just listening. But then I begin to share. And she's journaling. Like, she's just writing stuff down. She's not on our team no more. She's just writing stuff down. I'm just like, wow, God, this is... But I'm also nervous while I'm sitting there doing this. I'm like, she's going to report me to HR, take it somewhere. It was just like, oh, boy. So a lot of times that'll be purely one-on-one. They all know, like, where I stand in as far as my faith in Jesus Christ. Just by how I go about doing things. I mean, our website, my team website is No Limits M0923, which is Mark 9:23. All things are possible to him that believeth. And it sits right there on the website, so a lot of times when I have meetings with my team, I think I sent you one of the manuscripts, but I'll have, when I talked about fear, I'll have like proverbs or certain scriptures that I'm using as my basis, and I'll share it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, like, hey, this is what it is. And I honestly don't think anything of it. I'm like, no, I've never had, I'm sure people say some stuff, doesn't get said to me, so to speak. And so, but I'm also careful with that. That's usually with my leaders. So this is not going to be my group of 100 kids. This is my leaders, which is about 8 people. It used to be 12. I call them my go-tos. And I told them, I was like, Jesus had 12 disciples. So I'm having 12. And so that's where it started. Well, now it's 8. I remember I jokingly told him, I was like, one of y'all going to betray me. So I was like, one of y'all a snake. I got to figure out which one it is. Thankfully, I haven't had it.
Right. I was going to say, don't speak
I was like, nah,
don't speak it.
I was like, thankfully, 'cause I started this about 5 years ago, I think. So now it's probably like 8 or 7 because they graduate out. And so trying to figure it out. But I'll put a lot into them with the hopes of them kind of sharing, however, in that terminology for that age group to kind of communicate, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, you're just talking about the challenges that your students face and how you share Christ with them and, represent Christ to them. And you sent a video to me of basically a presentation that you presented to some of your student athletes. And in the presentation, I was definitely admiring your boldness with sharing scriptures and sharing God. And a part of what you shared was a little bit about your mom and also how at a certain age there was a fear that came because of how your mom passed. And so I want you to kind of hit on that because I think it's important that we as leaders who are leading youth, who are leading young people, that we're transparent with things that we go through, right? Absolutely. Or have been through. So talk about what made you even want to share that, and then what was it about? Well, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to part 1 of episode 40 featuring Shedrick Elliott, where the title is A Coach's Influence on and Off the Track. I hope that you're ready to tune in next Thursday, October 24th for part 2 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much everywhere you can find audio-only podcasts. If you haven't yet, go ahead and like the episode, share it with others that they may be blessed, and leave a comment letting us know something that stood out from this episode today. Also, if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to Breakthrough Conversations. In the meantime, everyone, enjoy your day and be blessed.